If I can play some role in helping the country to do that,
okay,
by God, I'm going to do it.
Okay, by God, when are you going to know the answer?
The serious answer is really soon.
We begin this morning with President Trump's State of the Union address, of course, a speech that left Democrats and Republicans as divided as ever. The president sending mixed messages, calling for unity as well as an end to, quote, ridiculous partisan investigations. Well, I have a great team here to break all of it down. But first, just in case you didn't stay up for the entire hour and 22 minutes, I want to give you an idea of what you missed. Right off the top, the president called for bipartisanship. That sounds great. But it also sounds a lot like what he said last year and the year before.
We must reject the politics of revenge, resistance, and retribution, and embrace the boundless potential of cooperation, compromise, and the common good.
Ideally, that is what most Americans want as well. And the president laid out some examples of where it has worked, including criminal justice reform. But when it came to other big issues like immigration, President Trump's idea of compromise sounded a lot more like my way or the highway.
Most of the people in this room voted for a wall, but the proper wall never got built. I will get it built. This is a smart, strategic, see-through steel barrier, not just a simple concrete wall. Simply put, walls work and walls save lives.
Unless you got tunnels. One line that did get Democrats out of their seats was one that the president apparently did not anticipate. Take a look.
No one has benefited more from a thriving economy than women, who have filled 58% of the newly created jobs last year. You weren't supposed to do that. Thank you very much.
We should explain that those Democratic women were dressed in white as a visual tribute to women who fought for the right to vote 100 years ago. But they mostly stayed quiet during the speech, even when the president urged unity on issues like infrastructure and prescription drug prices. And that was even more notable when the president said Democrats were tanking the economy by pushing, quote, ridiculous partisan investigations. I'm not sure how you would even connect the two. While the president seemed to expect applause, the vast majority of lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, they remained silent.
If there is going to be peace and legislation, there cannot be war and investigation. It just doesn't work that way.
Confuses me because, remember, the global markets were kicking it for quite some time during the Mueller investigation. I want to bring in NBC's Peter Alexander at the White House. Peter, the idea was to make this a speech about bipartisanship. There were moments when the president talked about that. Is that how you saw it?
Well, let's be clear. The White House aides were trying to sell this as optimistic and unifying, and the president did touch on those themes at the top and the bottom. There obviously were some places for common ground, like the idea of ending the epidemic of HIV in 10 years. But really, this was vintage Donald Trump. He was combative throughout much of the speech, effectively saying it's my way or the highway, as you noted, that he would go it alone on the idea of the border wall, saying I will build it, offering nothing in return for Democrats. Recognize that's an idea that was already shut down in the shutdown, with most Americans blaming the president for that demand. And in the most recent election, why there were so many of those women in white, they were there because they were there representing the rejection of Donald Trump. Nonetheless, the president pressed ahead sort of without compromise on all of these topics, ripping into the Democrats on some issues like late-term abortion, on nominations, and on what he described as those ridiculous partisan investigations, taking a real swipe at the Democratic-controlled House, which now oversees the oversight process. The Vice President, Mike Pence, was asked about that very topic this morning, and here's what he said.
We don't object to oversight. That's the proper role of committees in the Congress. But when it takes on a partisan tint, when it seems more intent on becoming a forum for invective against the president and against the administration, the American people expect better.
You know, Stephanie, the president sold this idea of choose greatness, like there's only one way, in his words, to make America great again, that it's his way. But what really struck me at the end of the evening was what used to be a sort of a special night each year, this one anomalous night from the year where you really heard the president in depth speaking out about his opinions and thoughts and his vision. With this president, because we hear from him so often, we hear his anger, his frustration, his fury, his complaints. It made this speech in a way less meaningful and effectively less special because it was an anomaly, but not because it represented what he really thinks, but perhaps so much of it was written for him that at times it didn't. Stephanie?
All right, Peter, I want to bring my panel in because I know they were all up watching. Anna Palmer, Politico senior Washington correspondent. Jason Johnson, politics editor at theroot.com. Chris Wilson, a Republican pollster and CEO of WPA Intelligence. And my dear friend John Weaver, former senior strategist for the McCain and Kasich campaigns. Anna, to you first. This speech was billed as bipartisan, but hours before the president gave it, when he was having lunch with reporters, he took a jab at the late Senator John McCain. He said that Joe Biden was dumb. That was just a couple hours before the speech. Then he gave the speech. He talked a bit about bipartisanship. But do you think it moved the political needle at all?
No, I feel like I've been kind of a broken record on State of the Union. I really agree with Peter. I think because this president speaks all of the time through Twitter to the press more than any other president, it wasn't special. It wasn't a new message. And I also just think the partisan back and forth, he also got in a fight over Twitter with Senator Schumer, is kind of the same thing over and over again. And the polarization of Washington and the State of the Union did nothing to bring things together or to give any sense that coming out of it, you had Democrats and Republicans looking to lock arms on really any issue.
Chris, the president got plenty of support from Republicans last night across the board, but not when he alluded to partisan investigations, and then he linked them to the economy. Does that signal anything to you?
Well, I think what it does, one, I don't... To what Anna said, I really feel like this president can't win when it comes to the situation. He's criticized for not having enough press conferences or not speaking to the press enough when he travels and calling them in enough to the Air Force One. And then he said, well, he speaks too much, so we can't actually... What
I don't think she
matter.
said he speaks too much.
He said he's always talking to... He's always saying things, he's always speaking, he's always communicating.
He's always lying.
Look like this.
Well, let's go with that.
And from a standpoint of, you know, I will say from a unity standpoint, I think one of the greatest speechwriters of the 20th century is Peggy Noonan. And I was taken aback by her comments last night when she called it an adept speech from a policy standpoint and pointed out several of his comments that she thought would cut through the clutter. And then you look at the polling that comes out right after it, and you have, when I was looking at it this morning, 76% of those people who found it favorable are people who I don't think will vote for him in 2020. And that to me is remarkable. When you have a president who can go and give a speech, which I believe was a good speech, I believe it was well received, and just I think for the most part it was bipartisan in its nature and was built around unity. And then at that point you have people on the other side who find it...
If I may, why do you think he lied so many times then? Lied about illegal border crossings, lied about the economy. If it was such a great speech about unity and the economy is doing so well, which it is, why lie?
Well, lying about the economy. What he said was he said he had continued a great economic
No, he didn't actually.
He said unemployment was at the long-time low with women, Hispanics,
That's not what he said.
Disabled.
He said he created the greatest economy in U.S. history. That's a lie. He said he created 5.3 million jobs. That's a lie. He said we are now the #1 producer of oil and gas, which we have been for 7 years. Those are lies, sir.
Now, are you talking about from a standpoint of when it began or how that has continued? And I think that's where we get into this infective whenever we parse his comments down to a level that I don't believe we've done with past presidents. And look, I feel like I've been just as critical of Donald Trump as anybody else has.
President Obama for wearing a tan suit.
Okay, but we didn't call him a liar for wearing a tan suit.
Because he wasn't.
And the one time whenever it's a different level of judgment. I feel like that he is being put up against in terms of his specific comments.
You know, I'm just a fact nut. So for me, when you say you've created 600,000 manufacturing jobs and the number is 400...
Which the head of the U.S. Manufacturing Association tweeted afterwards, it was correct.
And the Bureau of Labor and Statistics says 454,000. John?
Well, look, the real Donald Trump was the one who spoke off the record to the correspondents at lunch yesterday where he attacked a dead war hero and used schoolyard names to castigate opponents. The reason that the needle didn't move last night, Chris, is he spent 2 years lying to the American people. He is a 60% disapproval rating, and that's a really hard, and he has a really hard number against him. He can't move it because he has concrete on top of him of his own doing. He's lied and he's lied and he's lied. I thought
Do you think
last
there's
night,
anything he could have done that would have moved it, though?
Look, actions first. The problem.
I mean,
right
in
now,
the speech.
Well, in the speech, it was a yawner. He kind of low energy went through the embroidery of bipartisanship. He didn't really believe in it. You could tell by the low energy. He didn't really get excited until he started talking about the things that he cares about. Talking about socialism, which nobody in there really is for socialism except for a handful of people. Socialism, which he's trying to lay the contour for 2020, and then getting back to this false narrative that he's putting out about immigration. That's where he really got excited, and the country's already made its mind up about those issues.
Jason, yesterday I spoke to Mikey Sherrill, a newly elected Democrat from New Jersey. She said she could work with the president on things like drug prices and immigration. He brought those, and infrastructure, not immigration. He brought those things up last night. Do you think there is a path for Democrats and Republicans to work together on issues like that matter to so many Americans?
Highly unlikely with an election coming next year. There will be certain things like some criminal justice reform that they'll help him with, and maybe you'll have...
criminal justice reform, you've got to say, is a big win.
And these are legitimate issues, and like I said, Republicans and Democrats will work on those. But I think large issues like infrastructure, like rebuilding, fixing Highway 75 in Ohio that people have been talking about for years. Obama was there, Boehner was there, and everybody else like that. I don't think he's going to get those things accomplished. There's no political incentive for Democrats to do that, and the president thus far has not demonstrated himself to be the kind of person who could really negotiate. There's not much he's offering. And this is the thing. I personally think it was the most disciplined speech I have ever heard from President Trump, even candidate Trump. He actually stayed on message the whole time. The problem is it's not a unifying message. It's not a message that makes Democrats want to work with him, but it was a message that he very much targeted at Republicans, and I think they were happy.
Is it a message that is authentic to what he believes?
Oh, not at all. Not at all.
I don't know that I can answer that. I mean, I don't know him well enough to speak to what he truly believes from a standpoint of it. But I will say, I think that he was the most.
How do you say you don't know what he believes? I mean, we know what he believes.
Well, does he believe that we should end childhood cancer? Does he believe that we should end AIDS?
Everyone believes that. Hold on a second.
So,
can you tell me anyone? Can you please tell me anyone who believes we shouldn't end childhood cancer?
I saw a lot of people didn't stand and applaud for it.
For that?
Yeah, I did, and it was surprising to me because I do think that people are judged on that, and I think the parties are judged on that. And I thought it was awful when Obama spoke, and he spoke to unifying themes, and we saw Republicans sitting on their hands. And I think it's awful whenever Trump did it. I saw a 90-year-old man who stormed the beaches of Normandy, who stood and stand and applauded more for the country than elected Democrats in the audience. And I think that is a bad image for a party. It was a bad image for our party and Obama. It's a bad image for Democrats under Trump.
I also saw a president who was so jealous of that he said they wouldn't do that for me. Look, his sort of pettiness and venality is not something that's going to magically change because he gives an hour and 20-minute speech. That's really the issue we sort of see here. And
so
I also think, well, he's not going to, but I think a critical thing that's also happening here is every single president has given this speech after they get beaten in the midterms. We saw this from Bush. We saw this from Obama. The issue is, once you say, the President Obama's like, all right, I hear you. You have to convince the opposing party that now controls one or both of the houses of Congress that you actually want to work with them. And when the president's overall theme is, hey, as long as you guys want to actually do your job and operate as a check and balance on me, you won't get anything done. They hear that. Pelosi hears that. The party hears that. And it's not a message of unity. But everybody knew that about Trump. They knew that wasn't going to change.
Anna, John noted it before, but I want to ask you about that notable moment in the speech when the president attacked sort of this newly minted far-left agenda. Take a listen.
Here in the United States, we are alarmed by the new calls to adopt socialism in our country. America was founded on liberty and independence, and not government coercion, domination, and control. We are born free, and we will stay free. Tonight, we renew our resolve that America will never be a socialist country.
Anna, what do you make of that kind of language in a speech like this?
I think it was surprising. I don't think a lot of people thought he was going to say, to talk about socialism. I do think it is a total base play. I think this is something that the Democrats are having to wrestle with a little bit, as the energy on the left is really among the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Bernie Sanders wing of the party. And so he clearly jabbed right into the fire of where Democrats are having some of their own soul searching. Is the majority of the party socialist? Of course not. But I do think this is something that is going to come up in 2020, and he kind of laid the groundwork for how I think he's trying to own that argument.
John, did you see any exit ramp for the president and the wall and immigration, or is he setting the stage for a national emergency?
It appears he's setting the stage for a national emergency or another shutdown, as far-fetched as that could be. There doesn't seem to be any interest in the White House in a real solution or allowing the appropriators to come up with a deal where everybody can declare victory or give in a little bit and move forward. Sometimes you just have to eat crow in order to survive and fight another day, but this president doesn't seem to get that.
I've been naive or optimistic thinking that Republicans and Democrats are actually going to work together right now so we don't face another shutdown. Where do you think we're headed after that speech?
You know, you had Congressman Dan Crenshaw on Morning Joe this morning. I thought he really did a good job of sort of specifying the differences between the rhetoric and the actuality. And he said that he's shared that many Democrats have said that we want to work with you on this. Right now, our leadership is making it very difficult for us. But the language about this is all about a wall. But the truth is the funding goes for much more than a wall. It goes for more judges to adjudicate very quickly the immigrants that are coming across.
Democrats
to be able to keep
are
them
up
together.
for that. Democrats are up for lots of money to be spent on border security.
Who won't support that?
That
would pass immediately and could be signed tomorrow.
I think it would. And that's what Crenshaw said. If it were passed, the president has told him he would sign it.
Well, they should pass something.
I agree.
They should pass something and force him to either sign it or not sign it.
From the president, and he stabbed Mitch McConnell in the back, and he's demonstrated that he will change his mind at the last minute. Congress has been ready to get most of this done, but the president wouldn't allow a clean bill. So the idea after last night's speech that anyone would be any more enthusiastic or any more optimistic about us not having a shutdown was all but destroyed, because he pretty much said, that's what I'm prepared to do. I'm going to ruin Valentine's Day for everybody.
All right. Well, we have to leave it there, and let's remind our audience. The wall does not equal border security. There is border security outside the wall. Smart border security. All right, we're going to leave it there. Up next, President